What's the weirdest thing you've eaten?
So in Japan, there is a thing called shirako.
Yeah.
And actually, it's one of the delicacies in Japan, especially during the winter time.
Okay.
It's basically a fish sperm.
I'm trying to picture this. Like,
I can't be disrespect to the chef. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just like, I just close my eyes and I just shove it in my mouth and I just swallow. And I'm like, this is not good. This is not good.
welcome back to the show, guys. I'm your host, as always, Sean Kelly. Got a special guest for you guys today, Chef Min Kim. How's it going?
Sean, how are you?
I'm good, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited for this.
Absolutely. When we met, so you're part of Mizumi, obviously,
Right.
and got to meet you at your restaurant, and that was one of the best meals I've ever had.
Thank you.
That's how much of a mark you left on me. I had to have you on the show.
And like considering that was 2 years ago, I was like looking back like at my feed and the messages that we've been sending back and forth, and I'm like, holy hell, that was like 2 years ago.
It's been a while. Time
like,
flies.
Time flies. And obviously, like I've been, I'm a big fan of yours. So I've been following your journey and stuff, and but just to think that was 2 years ago, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
That was
Before I even
mind-blowing.
started the podcast or anything.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So how'd you get involved with Mizumi and being at the Wynn as a partner? That's an incredible feature to accomplish.
Yeah. So, I've been with the company for almost 9 years now. My journey with Wynn started in Macau. We have our sister property in Macau. We have our sister property in Boston, but also in Macau. And back in 2015, there was a property called Wynn Palace, which was second Wynn property in Macau, was being constructed and, getting ready to open. So then one of my friends that I used to work with back in Australia, he was there already in Macau as pre-opening team of that property. And he called me. I remember I was in Australia at the time when he called me. He's like, hey, there's a really cool gig. And this is like grand. This is, off this planet type of thing, and I'm really excited for it. And I want you to be part of it, if you want. And I was like, man, sounds pretty cool. I've never even thought about working in Macau, right? I'm like, okay, let me just go and check it out. So even before committing to anything, I went over there just to see what it's like. And it was actually really cool. So I'm like, okay, I'm in, right? So that was back in 2015, started my journey with Wynn. And then after 4.5 years of my time in Macau, I kind of thought it was my time to just move on. And then, at the time, this opportunity came up in Las Vegas. So I just got transferred from Macau to here. And,
Nice.
It's just been here ever since.
Beautiful. So you never been to Vegas before you moved here?
So I have a couple of times, but just to travel, right?
Yeah.
Just to visit. And I think there is a huge difference between visiting a place and liking it versus living there, right?
sure.
It's completely different, I guess, dynamics. So to be honest, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't gamble.
Wow.
Right? So
That's rare here.
Very rare for a chef, right? Being
Yeah.
a chef, when I tell people oh, I don't drink, and they're like, what is wrong with you? Literally, they're seriously concerned, and they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? So so just in that sense, being in Vegas wasn't really top of my list, the place to live and work.
Right.
But I thought about the culture and the people that I work with at Wynn, and being a professional in my field and in my industry, for me, I work so much that I don't even get a chance to go out and enjoy the actual city so much anyway. So for me, it's about I spend almost 70 to 80% of my life at work. So what mattered more for me, and which still is about where I work and the people that I work with.
Wow.
So that really attracted me to come here because I knew enough professional people around me that I'd be working with.
Yeah. Wow. 70, 80% is high. So you're pretty much at the restaurant all day.
All day. And I have my different business that I run in Asia as well. So
Right.
because of time difference, let's say I will finish my work at my restaurant at Wynn at 1, and I'll go home, have dinner, work out a little bit and shower. And from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., I'll work on my business in Asia.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So I only sleep about 5 hours every day.
So you don't sleep till 6 a.m.?
Yeah. And then, yeah. Sometimes worse, depending on what's going on over there. During the time especially, Asia, like generally like struggled a lot, right? F&B industry, they suffer so much.
Really?
So, I took my restaurant and my business took a lot of hit and damage during the time. And, I had to focus a lot more on them in terms of operations and, profitability and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, now I only spend about 2 or 3 hours every day with them. But like comparatively speaking, back in 2021, I was spending probably about 4 or 5 hours every day, just going through the strategies and plans and long-term plans and short-term plans and stuff like that.
It's amazing to see you thrive in this space because a lot of restaurants fail.
A lot. I mean, you probably know this, but statistically speaking, they say 4 restaurants out of 5 that open generally fails, like globally speaking. So, only 1 restaurant out of 5 that opens actually survives and strives. So which is like crazy number if you think about it.
Yeah. Did you know that going into the restaurant industry?
Not really. I mean, like my dad is a chef, right? So like in a way I'm a like second generation chef.
Yeah.
And I was born in a restaurant. My dad, I grew up in a poverty. I mean, for lack of better terms, poverty. Like we didn't have a lot of money, right? And back in the days, people become a chef because you're a right? People like you don't become a chef because you pursue glory and money and success. Like, I'm talking like 40, 50 years ago, you become a chef because you have no other skills in your life. Like, oh, what I do? Okay, I'll just go restaurant and wash dishes. And then you slowly move up the rank. And before you know, you're like, hey, chef, right? That's kind of what happened to my dad as well. So, when he decided to open his own restaurant, he didn't have too much money. So what he did was he bought a property. He actually built it himself, him and his friends. So half of that property that he bought, he transferred into like a restaurant, the forefront of it, and then the back end of it, he turned into a like residential housing, I guess, like spa. So when I was born, like literally, I was in a literal sense, I was born in a restaurant.
Wow.
So like, because we didn't have too much space, we actually even didn't have a kitchen. The only kitchen space that we had for the house was basically the kitchen of the restaurant. So we shared the same space. So, every single day, every breath that I took as a kid in that area was being part of the restaurant. So I couldn't think of anything else but to become a chef, right? Like, because that was almost the only option that was shown to me as a kid growing up for over a decade.
Yeah. Was this in Australia?
It was in Korea.
Korea.
It was in Korea. So my dad specialized in Japanese cuisine. He studied and trained a lot in Japan, came back to Korea to open up his own restaurant.
Nice.
And it was pretty cool, right? I mean, like, as a kid, I would go into the kitchen, and then I'll always see my dad like yelling and screaming, he's like throwing around and he's like telling people off and like, nobody's like talking back to him. And I'm like, dude, that's cool, right?
Wow.
In my head, I'm like, man, like I want to be that. I don't know what that is, but I want to be that.
Yeah.
That's how I was kind of inspired to become a chef.
Dang. So he was a were you kind of fearful of him?
Very, right? Like, I mean, he was such a like authority type of figure, right? I wouldn't say he was a tyrant, right? He was more like very honorably respected from his staff, right? But even his presence spoke a lot. Like, when he entered the room, like one of those people that comes into the space and immediately you would feel the energy change, right? He was one of those type of people. Like he will walk into the kitchen or he'll walk into the restaurant and straight away the air immensely just changed.
Wow.
That type of like, I wouldn't want to say it was a fear. It was more of that, I guess, like predominant like alpha male type of energy, right? Like you walk in and you're like, oh, dude, respect type of feel. Yeah.
Wow. So do you kind of carry that in your restaurants too?
To a degree. I mean, I try, right? I try, and I'm a very, very strict, like type of like leader because, I have very high standard to achieve, right? And in order to achieve the high standard and excellence, you have to pursue a pathway of discipline, like hard working ethic, right? Like commitment, dedication, your passion, everything, right? Like in the pursuit of excellence, it comes with a lot of sacrifice. People don't realize that, right? They think like, oh, just be good, like just just make it nice, or like be excellent, right? People think it's just like as simple and easy as just saying it, but there's just so much sacrifice that comes with it, right? And like what I mean by sacrifice, there's a lot of that long hours, right? When I was working in Japan, I used to work like 80 to 90 hours a week.
Jeez.
Right? And like, and like they are very, very strict and sometimes even like physically violent type of environment, right?
Wow.
They will like literally like kick you in the leg,
Dang.
right? They're like, why'd you stuff up, right? So there was a lot of that intense environment that really like makes you into almost like a monster, but not in sort of bad way, right? Monster in a way of like you are like fearless, like you are strong, and you are, like you have that dominance, right?
You
Like
could get through anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long were you learning in Japan for?
So I was there for 4 years,
Wow.
and probably like working in Japan was the hardest experience that I ever had in my career, right? Like I was saying, you literally work 80 to 90 hours a week, and that's like normal, right?
Crazy.
When there is like big event or when it's a peak busy season, whatever, you will literally break like 90 to 100 hours.
And you're standing the whole time, right?
Whole time,
my
like running, like literally running in your sweat.
Wow.
So I remember during the summertime, like I would finish work like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. because like you gotta like clean the kitchen. Like
Oh, you had to clean too?
spotless clean.
Dang.
Like on my knees, on my hands and knees, like scrubbing the floor with
Whoa.
like toothbrush.
A toothbrush?
Toothbrush.
Holy crap.
Yeah, like literally they give you like one of the bigger ones, like
Yeah.
toothbrush and toothpaste, and they're like, okay, you go from there to there all the way, scrub.
Wow.
And I'm like literally scrub? And they're like, yep. So that, I mean, like I could literally sleep on the floor. That's how clean the place was.
Jeez.
Like in Japanese people are very like sensitive about hygiene, the cleanliness and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, which I thought it was really good thing for a restaurant to focus on. So I didn't have any complaints, but sometimes I would finish at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, and I would like come out of the restaurant and I don't realize how much I sweat, right? But like sometimes I would come out and I would see my like black t-shirt completely almost white
Whoa.
from like the salinity from my sweat.
Crazy.
Yeah,
That's unreal.
Yeah.
Why is the sushi so good in Japan?
I think it's a dedication. I think it's a dedication to master craftsmanship. A lot of Japanese people, they dedicate their whole life in one craftsmanship. Like, you go to Japan, like for example, you go to a sushi restaurant and they only do sushi.
Right.
For example, like, comparatively speaking in America or like in more like Western societies, even Australia, Europe, you go to Japanese restaurant and they do sushi, they do tempura, they do teppanyaki,
Yeah.
they do like everything, right? So, it's good from a consumer's perspective. It's good because you have a lot more different varieties to try. But I think when you stretch out your pool so far, it's a lot more difficult for you to go in depth in terms of quality. And I think that's what Japanese chefs do so great. Like you go to like tempura restaurant in Japan, in Tokyo, and this chef you talk to, he's like 3rd generation of tempura chef. Like his father was a tempura chef.
Wow.
His grandfather was tempura chef.
Yeah.
So literally he's been like the whole family's been running that restaurant for like century, right? So then obviously when you do something for a century, it's probably safe to say you pick up a trick or two here and there, right?
Yeah.
So, they literally master their craftsmanship, like, and it's accumulated experience and knowledge over the course of so many years, right? And, that's how you become a master at something.
Yeah. I agree with that. Whenever I go to a restaurant and the menu's super long, that's a red flag for me.
100%.
Like a diner, it's like 5 pages. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're probably freezing everything on this.
Right, 100%. Like you literally feel like you're reading a Bible, right?
Yeah.
Like page after page after page, you're like, okay, at this point, like, I'm lost,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I like simple menus for sure.
Correct, yeah.
Which dishes took the longest for you to perfect? I know sushi is pretty hard, right?
Very hard. And I think, and to be very, very honest, Sean, like I don't think I've actually perfected any of that yet, right? Again, comparatively speaking, like, I know there are a lot of good chefs out there, and I know there are a lot of good restaurants out there. And every time when I go out to eat at those restaurants, especially like in Japan, it really humbles me, like to a shame almost. I'm like, and I'm eating sometimes like at this like 2 Michelin, 3 Michelin, well, like sometimes not even like that level. Like sometimes you go to like this like really simple casual restaurant, hole in the wall type of place in the back alley of like Tokyo, Shinjuku, whatever.
Yeah.
And you walk in and literally they don't have the menu, right? And you talk to these like masters or like the head chefs, and they're like, oh, you just eat whatever I give you. And I'm like, okay. And they start giving you all these crazy ass dishes and like just mind blowing dishes, right?
Wow.
And just like to see how much they know and how skilled they are and how talented they are. And they're like nobodies, right? Nobody knows them. They own a like small joint with a hole in the wall in the back alley of like, back of the Tokyo somewhere.
Wow.
But like you look at them and you're like, man, you are so much better than I am. And like, it just really humbles you, the notion of that, right?
Yeah.
So even though like I like to think that I'm good at what I do, and I believe that I am good at what I do to a certain point, but I don't think I'm to a level where I can say, yeah, I perfected like any of my skill set or craftsmanship.
Wow. And that's crazy to say because you've been working at this your whole life.
20 years.
Yeah. But there's always people doing better. I mean,
always, right?
Yeah. Is it hard for you to eat in the US? Like eat at restaurants?
Yes and no, Sean. Like yes and no. I mean, yes, in a sense, I've worked at like 6 different countries. So, and I travel a lot, right? I travel like I think almost 60 countries. So,
Wow.
So there's so many things, I guess, so many references for me to compare to, right? So in a sense, I would go out and, especially like this day and age, like everything is so inflated. Like you go to a restaurant and you literally like have like half full type of meal and it still costs you like $200,
Yeah.
right? With
Especially
like,
in Vegas.
Especially in Vegas,
Yeah.
right? So then like you think about the value for money that you pay, right? Yes, it was a good meal, but then when you really think about the value versus like how much you pay, I don't think it amounts to what you actually pay. So, in that sense, I think about, oh man, like, if I was in Japan or if I was in like Korea or Singapore or like, China, I think, man, like I could have had like a beautiful meal at like a fraction of the cost that I pay for.
Yeah.
So in that regard, in that aspect, I'm like, oh, it's kind of tough me going out to restaurants in America to pay that much money and get that sort of quality. But no, in a sense, because in America, there are so many different options.
Right.
So many different options. And, I feel like I love the sense of when I go out to restaurants, a lot of like servers and, waiting staff, like front house staff, like they are very friendly, right? Whereas like you go to a restaurant in Japan, in Korea, or like, Asian countries, they're like the waiting staff are a little more reserved.
They don't even talk to you.
They don't even talk to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I've heard about it.
Right? And they just stand there and they literally like just look at you, like like with their side eyes, like, "Are you done? Are you done?"
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of awkward. But whereas like in America, like everyone's kind of friendly, right?
Right.
You have actually great experience and time interacting with the staff at the restaurant.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest difference.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't even think about it. You know all the margins, so from that perspective, you're like,
That's
oh,
true.
this guy spent like $20 on this, and I paid 200.
Right. So it's a curse. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Yeah.
And I try not to think about the business aspect of the dining experience when I go out, because once you start getting into the more technical and business side of the whole dining experience, it's just not fun anymore. Right?
Yeah, you're becoming too anal at that point.
Right.
What's the weirdest thing you've eaten?
There are so many. Weirdest. I mean, there are just a couple of things. So in Japan, there is a thing called shirako.
Yeah.
Shirako it's very commonly eaten, and actually it's one of the delicacies in Japan, especially during the winter time.
Okay.
It's like, in a literal translation, it's basically a fish sperm.
Fish sperm.
Yeah.
How did they even capture that?
So
I'm trying to picture this. Like,
it's actually not as crazy as you think. So you catch a fish, and when you take the gut out, there is a sack. There is a sack of sperm,
Yeah.
right? So it's almost like if you think of any type of organ, right? But there is like a part where like the fish stores its sperm in its own like little sack.
Okay.
So they basically extract that out from the fish, and they whether cook it or sometimes they serve it like sashimi raw. Most times with the ponzu, with a little like citric soy sauce
Yeah.
to sort of cut down that like fishiness to it. I understand it's a delicacy and I understand it's a cultural thing, but that is something that I can just never get used to. I've tried a few times, and when you go to these like top high-end omakase restaurants and you just have to eat what chefs give you, you have no choice, right? And I can't be disrespect to the chef, so sometimes I'm just like, I just close my eyes and I just shove it in my mouth and I just swallow, and I'm like, this is not good. This is not good.
I can't see that being good.
Yeah, and even just like conceptually think like the notion behind, okay, this is a sperm. You know what I mean? Like it's just like something that I would never put in my mouth for a million years, but I'm doing it because I'm a chef, right? And it's
You're doing it for the people, man.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like probably one other thing is like fugu, like blowfish.
Blowfish? Oh, that's the poisonous one.
Poisonous fish.
Yeah.
And like, which is like delicious. Like, but there is obviously like 70% of the actual fugu fish, blowfish, that you can't eat because it's like poisonous. So there's only like 30 to 40% of the whole fish you can actually, which is edible. But like, I love it, right? Especially like it's such a winter delicacy during the winter time. Like I crave it so much.
Yeah.
But every time I eat it, I think about, like, I'm just trying to comprehend, like, okay, so at some point through the human evolution, some guy must have thought, hey, what's that like weird looking blowing thing in the water? Like, I wonder if I can try to eat it, right? And then like he would cut it up and like whichever way he cut it, he's like, I wonder if it's edible. Hey, come here. Like, hey, do you want to try this a little bit? And this guy dies, right?
Yeah.
And then like this guy must be a psychopath. So at that point, instead of saying, oh man, this is not edible, don't eat it, he's like, oh, okay, so that part is not edible.
Yeah.
What about this part? hey, come, call another guy. He's like, hey, try this part. And this guy dies too, right?
Yeah.
You go through so many of that practice to figure out what is edible and what part is not edible.
Yeah.
And like just the notion behind somebody even like willing to try something that he's seen people die from, but just to pursue that procedure of like, I want to keep trying until I figure out which part that I can eat.
There's someone out there that did that once, probably.
Right? It's just like, that is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, that's funny. I tried jellyfish once.
Oh, what'd you think of it?
I didn't like it.
Yeah?
Yeah, do you like it?
I do, but it's got to be done right, though.
Okay.
It's got to be done right. Was that, like, what was the part that you didn't like?
So I was at Wingley. I tried it. I guess it was kind of rubbery.
Yeah, the texture.
Texture,
It was the texture, right?
Yeah.
What about the flavor?
It just tasted bland. Is it supposed to have a flavor?
No, I mean, depends how you do it. I mean, there are different ways that you can prepare.
Yeah.
You can season it and sauce it in a way that it can be infused into jellyfish. But the jellyfish itself, like naturally, doesn't have any flavor.
Okay.
Like bland. Like
Yeah, that's probably why I didn't like it then.
Yeah. It didn't come with the sauces or anything like that.
No, just plain.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming the best sushi you've had is in Japan, right?
It's hard to say. Like, I think for me, yes. But I think a lot of times when you go to Japan, like people have this not weird, I guess it's normal, but to me it's kind of like strange idea and expectation of like, I'm going to have the best sushi experience ever.
Yeah.
So at that point, doesn't matter what they feed you, you're going to like it. Because you're in that already set of mind, this is where the best sushi is at, right? Yeah, and I understand like some of my best sushi experience definitely was in Japan, but even like some places outside Japan, like Hong Kong, Singapore, like you can still go to Japanese restaurant in those cities and countries and have like exceptional sushi experiences. And like, for example, like I do my sushi a little bit differently. I do it more like in a contemporary way, which is not accepted in Japan. Like if I made my sushi the way I do in Japan, people will tell me, go back to America, right?
Really?
It's very contemporary.
Wow.
But like, Katy Perry used to come into my restaurant a lot. And like literally she said like, chef, you can quote this anywhere you go. She goes, your sushi is the best sushi that I ever tasted in my life, even
Wow.
compared to Japan.
That's awesome.
Because for her, like for Katie, my sushi was more comfortable in terms of flavor, right? It's not as fishy, right? I sauce it differently, I garnish it differently. So it's not, even like, for example, when you try uni, sea urchin, some people don't like it because of texture, because that's briny flavor.
Yeah, fishy, right?
Right. But I sauce it differently, I garnish it differently to a point you're tasting uni, but it doesn't taste as fishy and briny,
Right.
right? Whereas like in Japan, the taste of ocean, taste of that brininess is what is considered as tasty.
Yeah.
So different, like, I guess different concept.
I noticed you did that because I don't like oysters, but when I tried it at Mizumi, it didn't taste as fishy as normal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do you source your stuff from like certain parts of the world that are not as fishy, I guess?
I source a lot of my seafood, like majority of my seafood and fish from Japan.
Japan.
And I think there's a lot of authenticity behind that, right? Like I'm a firm believer in authenticity. And one of the best way to bring out the authenticity in the cooking is try to source the ingredients from where the cuisine is originally developed at, right? It just makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So, that's why I try to source a lot of stuff from Japan. So even the oysters that you had was actually, that was actually local.
Oh, okay.
Comes from like West Coast. I love West Coast seafood.
Yeah.
So I'm not like really married to the idea of like I have to source everything from Japan. Like for me, it's about the quality, right? Sometimes some stuff that I get from Japan is good, but then again, I can actually find and source better ingredients locally, surprisingly. So, for me, it's always, I try to go by obviously the belief of authenticity, but at the same time, it always comes down to the flavor and then quality of the ingredients.
I love that. I also saw Khabib stopped by, right?
I love him.
Yeah, what was that like?
He's a type of guy that I respect a lot. Like even before I met him, like I've always loved him, right?
Yeah.
Like the way, his work ethics and his mentality and his striveness towards like success and winning, it's just like, it's so fascinating. So when he came by, I was like almost like starstruck, right? I'm like, oh my God, it's Khabib. And then, I have a lot of friends who is part of UFC, Dana, who's a good friend of mine. So, he stopped by and, they kind of hooked me up with him. And they're like, hey, chef, come here and say hello to Khabib. And he was a very, very nice guy.
Nice.
And he talked to me a lot about, because I asked a lot of questions. I'm like, man, like what it's like to be like one of the best champs in the world.
Yeah.
And, a lot of answers that he gave was like very humble. Like I like humble people.
Yeah.
I think having that humility and modesty is really important in people.
For sure.
Not to the point that you don't want to dismiss yourself, right? But to the point that I don't like people with, boasting of the energy of like arrogance.
Right.
Whereas Khabib was, considering how big he is and how successful and like famous he was very, very humble.
Nice.
And I love that about him.
Yeah, he's undefeated, one of the best of all time.
Yep.
And then you got guys like McGregor that are the opposite.
Yeah, I have a lot of things to say, but I will not say. Which I've met Connor a couple of times too.
Oh, nice.
He was on the property promoting his whiskeys and stuff. And,
Okay.
I've met him a few times, and I will just stop there.
Yeah. I want to dive into the business side of Mizumi for a bit. It's one of the top restaurants in Vegas. It's been open for 4 years, right?
Yep.
What have you learned throughout that process about running a successful restaurant in Vegas?
I would say, Sean, like probably one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is the power of the marketing, right? And we've talked about this briefly before jumping on a podcast. For example, like, and again, I'm being very careful mentioning these names and brand, like,
Yeah.
But like for example, like let's say Nobu, right? Great brand, great restaurant, and I want to stress out this, like. I have so much respect for Nobu-san, right? He's a great chef. He's one of the greatest mentor. But the thing about that Nobu and what they do so great is the marketing, right? People like automatically think of like Japanese food and they think of Nobu. Like, where do you want to go Japanese food? Like one of the probably first thing that people think about is, what about Nobu? How, like,
For sure.
So it's one of those, it became such an iconic institutional figure in this industry. And that's what I've sort of learned and realized, like even though Mizumi has, almost on par level of quality with Nobu, right? And it's arguably, in my opinion, one of the best Japanese restaurants, not only in Vegas, one of the best Japanese restaurants that you could have like station-wide. Like it's just like nationwide, right? It's just such a great concept. The food is great. The quality is great. Like the standard is great. But it's just so undermarketed. So that's what I really focused on with obviously the marketing team from the Wynn for the last 4 years to really truly try to develop that power of the brand, right? Really strengthening the brand power, which is everything in this industry.
Right. Yes. You do want to get your personal brand out there more and become more known.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm just starting to pursue my own venture soon, right? And I think what I've done at Mizumi at Wynn is really great. And, you know, and obviously I will continue to do that. But, you know, I want to like really grow personally, but also like, you know, have really my own brand out there, you know, just to, you know, compete with Nobu-san and, right, one of those top chefs levels out there. And I really want to be on that level one day. So that's what I'm trying to pursue very soon.
Nice. Do you ever want to go on those cooking shows?
I've been on a couple of those cooking shows, and you know, the thing about that is, like, I don't want to mention the name because it's like very, very well-known cooking show. But I was on this cooking show a couple of years ago, and so that was filmed in Tennessee. And what I didn't realize was, well, I only realized when I got there, the whole thing was like staged.
Oh yeah, there was a script.
It was like so upsetting and disappointing
Oh.
to find out. Obviously, not to the whole extent of it,
Yeah.
but basically they've already determined who is going to win.
What? Ah. So you can't even win.
You can't, like, unless you are so good to the point you can convince the director or producer at that point on the spot to like change his mind, thinking, you know what, I actually don't want that guy to win. I want this guy to win.
Wow.
Which never happens, right? Because everything is already scripted to a point around knowing that who's going to win.
That's not cool.
And so, you know, and like there was a lot of different competitors and, you know, people on the show, and nobody, like, except the guy who knew who was going to win, everybody else had no clue of that idea.
That's crazy.
So everyone was like really dumbfounded, right? And
Yeah.
we're like, so why are we even here?
Yeah, what's the point?
Right? So that was really disappointing. And I hear a lot of shows, maybe not every show, but a lot of shows like that.
Damn, that's upsetting.
Yeah. But a lot of like viewers, we don't know that, right?
I had no idea.
We get so sucked into, for example, like, you know, shows like MasterChef and, you know, stuff like you watch and you get so drawn into that whole competition as if you are participating yourself. But, you know, so it's quite upsetting sometimes.
Wow. So what's next for you, man? I know you got Min's Test Kitchen going on right now.
Yeah.
And you said you want to open up 8 more restaurants.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm sort of partnering up with venture capital people that I've known for a long time, you know, and I think it's really time for me to just be on my own and just really spread their wings and just see where the sky limit is, right? I just really want to like get out there and start developing my own brand and, you know, see where that takes me.
Love that, man. Anything you're trying to promote or end off with?
You know, like I think I'm in a stage where I'm still like a little bit cautious about like, you know, what to promote and, you know, how to sort of like word it and how to like sort of strategize it a little bit. But, you know, when I have more definite plans of what I want to do and where I'll be, I will definitely hit you up again, Sean, and, you know, we'll make another session of it.
Love it. Thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.